Hello, we're here with Chris McKenna. I am so excited for this interview. His work with the organization Protect Young Eyes is such an important thing we all need to know about. He founded this organization. I'm going to introduce him to you here in a moment. Anyway, we're built tough here in Michigan. I'm so glad to be sharing this time with you. Can you tell us just what's the heart and mission of Protect Young Eyes?
Yeah, the statement we like to use, Hope, is we help families, schools, and churches create safer digital spaces. So we are a pro-technology organization. We're on technology now. We can use technology for amazing, life-giving, God-honoring things, but at the same time, it does have edges and features that we all have to be aware of, whether you're 4, 14, or 40. So I jokingly say I often find that whatever is good for a teenager is probably good for you. I mean, I should be able to show just about everything that I do on my smartphone as an adult, father, husband, to a 12-year-old. And if I can't, then I should ask myself questions, why not, like that, right? So we believe in technology, but pro-tech, pro-kid, protect. We need to protect all of us from certain parts of the internet, whether that's pornography, whether that's just addictive behaviors. I just did a webinar a week and a half ago on gaming disorder, which is a real thing, recognized medically as a real thing. And so there's just edges to this human experiment that we all find ourselves in right now that we all just need to be very aware of. And so we want to level up that education and do it from different directions in the classroom with students so they can make awesome choices when nobody's looking, or with their friends, with parents, so that they know, even though it wasn't their sort of native language technology, how to educate and help their kids use technology well. And then also in schools and in churches for that leadership to be up to date. And also leadership in other organizations, Hope, like training that we do for police units, the Internet Crimes Against Children task forces that exist in every state. We do training for them just so that they're up to date on the trends for those who are on the front lines just seeing really horrible things. And so that educational aspect of what we do is a lot of our heartbeat, but at all of those different levels, because it impacts all of us.
Yeah. I love how you're leading the charge on this, Chris, and you have an excellent team. If anyone wants to find more about Protect Young Eyes, that's the handle there to go find them on Instagram. You guys are on Facebook. Of course, you have a website. Leading the charge on many stages. I've seen you really advocate for safety of really all humans, but especially protecting our kids at a legislative level. And I want to ask you right now about what you're doing very specifically in the last week or so. I've seen you really calling out Apple. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about what are you trying to do there in calling Apple out?
Apple may have the single greatest ability on earth to impact childhood.
Mm.
They are the largest, they're the most valuable company on earth, okay, valued at over $2 trillion. They doubled in value during the pandemic. So while we were all struggling with technology, they were benefiting from technology. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, that's just a reality. They have an immense responsibility to make the safety and protection of children the easiest thing to do on their devices if they care about kids. And so what we simply want to do is ask them to do simple things. I believe that most of what it would take to level up the protection of children on an iPhone are things that Apple's a brilliant, group of engineers could do in 2 weeks. No question. And so we just simply want to ask them to make some changes and default to safety. We've had the position for a couple of years now, and this started back in 2019 when I testified in the US Senate. And Senator Ernst from Iowa asked me a very pointed question about her iPhone, which she had right in front of her. She said, "What's the one thing that you would do on this iPhone?" She said, "I have grandchildren and I struggle with it, Chris. What's the one thing you would do?" I said, "Senator, the easiest thing that either Apple or Google could do is they could simply make their devices default to safety settings based on the age of the user. And every device that has an account attached to it, whether it's an Apple ID or a Gmail account, knows the age of its user. Why isn't it that safety is the default? Instead, what parents are left with right now, Hope, for the 88% of teens who use iPhones, based on a recent survey by Piper Sandler, just finished this spring, 88% of American teens. That's a massive responsibility. What we have right now are devices in the hands of 88% of teens that are exploitive by default, and we have to hunt for safety. I believe that it should be the other way around. We should have to hunt for exploitation. We should have to put effort behind being exploited. And by default, the device should be safer for kids. These are not heavy lifts for a $2 trillion organization. And so we have approximately 10 different specific requests that we're in the process of finalizing right now. We're joining up with allies in the cause, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, and others who also feel very strongly about these sorts of efforts and are simply saying, Apple, listen, we're not asking you to do difficult things, but if you care about children, here are some ideas. And I want to start a conversation with them. I want to sit down across from Tim Cook and say, Tim, I know you care about kids. Lead the way. Show parents you care. Spend $1 million or $2 and change tens of millions of childhoods in 2 weeks. That is your opportunity. So that is the spirit behind the Default to Safety campaign for Apple. And it's something that other large organizations are starting to pick up on. Nicosi, with their effort working with Google, this fall in the United States, every school-issued Chromebook is going to have its safety settings on by default, which is a really big deal. It hasn't been that way. The entire burden has been on school IT administrators or sending school-issued Chromebooks home to mom and dad and guardians to figure out. They have been the ones bearing the burden of protecting these, quote, educational devices. Shouldn't they show up at schools protected? We think the answer has been yes forever, but finally, and we're pleased. I don't want to make light of it. I'm pleased that they're finally doing something about it. And we're just saying, Apple, it's your turn. Follow the lead. So that's the spirit of the campaign.
It's a beautiful thing. And what's it going to take, you think, for them to take this seriously?
Wow. Yeah, isn't that the $2 trillion question? We're going to do what we do best, and that is ask all the motivated mamas and parents who follow us at Protect Young Eyes and others like you with influence, and simply inviting them to join. We have, some legislative connections who are pretty keen on this, who would love to help make something happen. Even some journalist connections that we're going to have jump on board with this. And so we're gonna go at all fronts. And I don't want this to be an us versus Apple thing. I need them. I simply want to say, you have power that no other company on earth has. And this isn't a novel idea. Back in 2018, Hope, their own shareholders sent the board of directors a letter saying, hey, we know that there's other parental control solutions out there, but nothing is as intuitive and easy as Apple, you doing it on the phone itself. Instead of making parents go and buy something or figure it out, if I could be really direct for a minute, it's almost as if the current posture of parental controls on an iPhone are discriminatory because they favor the privilege of an involved parent.
Holy cow.
And I'm sorry, not every child has that.
They favor the privilege of an involved parent. A
and
technologically aware enough and involved parent. Which
aware, involved, educated, have the time, have the resources. And I want to give credit where credit's due. That is a quote from Lena Nealon, who is the director of corporate relations at Nicosi. And she said that to me a week or week and a half ago. And I was like, Lena, that is exactly it. I mean, how many, as you deal with, work with families, and it's not saying that, parents are dumb, that's not it, but look at circumstances, be it single parents, be it co-parenting situations. There are all kinds of stressors on families that make it difficult to keep up with this stuff. And who suffers when that happens? It's the children. So why not make it the easiest thing to do on a phone? So I want to make sure, I mean, Lena said that to me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's brilliant. It's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear you size it up that way, Chris, that essentially this is about being under resourced, or if you're going to be safe, it's because you have all the right resources in place, which is to some degree, like you're saying, this reeks of discrimination. It reeks of lack of using the resources and the care that is possible from these organizations to really mitigate all the danger that's going on. I have a few questions that we have for you from some folks who are tuning in and just like, tell me what I need to do to help with keeping my kids safe. So I want to jump into those real quick, but what are some quick tips you got? Just kind of roll them off. What do you want parents to really take a look at tuning into with their kids and their devices?
Good. I love that question. We talk about 4 layers of protection at Protect Young Eyes. In fact, we've crafted a master class around it that is launching in pieces this week. And I have about 90 people who are piloting it this week, which I'm really excited about. The first layer is relational. We must look for bridges of digital trust that we can build between us and our kids. Because if all we try to do is control our children's online behavior, if we accept the reality that they know more than we do, then we actually compel them into becoming little digital ninjas who are going to find a way to beat us. They will always find a way, and there will always be a way to beat whatever technical solutions we want to put in place. And so what that often means, so then, I mean, that's a very intangible thing to say. Chris, tell me what that looks like. We break that down in our course, but very simply, I think that it involves talking openly about everything nobody talked to you about. I think that it involves saying everything to your children that you're not sure about or don't know how to control. And that means looking into the eyes of your 13-year-old and saying, I know that no matter what I do, if I put this supercomputer in your hands that we call an iPhone 12, that there's going to be ways that you can probably get around it. And some of those ways mean that you could radically change the trajectory of your life. And honestly, honey, I can't stop that, but I want to invite you into using this device with me. And I promise that if you bump into something that is horrible and you tell me about it, I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to smash the phone. I am learning this with you, but we've got to do this together. And I just think when you call out the things that give you concern that you're not sure about, and then you say to them, so what are your ideas? And you invite their agency and ownership into helping you come up with stuff. Those things I think just automatically have less control over your family and less control over the curiosity of your child. That which you call out automatically has less curiosity control over us. That's just human nature.
Yeah.
So that relational connection, yeah.
Okay, beautiful. So, again, it's about not just having enough savvy and awareness to tackle this stuff. And it's not just about kids who have parents who care enough and are concerned enough and involved enough, but it's also about, building the relationship aspect and so much more, which is why I'm so glad you guys have a course. I think about Gail Dines, who does a lot of work in this,
Yeah.
in advocating for the protection of our kids. One of the concepts that she illuminates is that so often our kids have their sexuality hijacked before they even get the chance to own it for themselves, because they begin to experience things and they're introduced to things that take them down the path, and I'm talking about erotic materials of any nature, any sort of sexually stimulating stuff, or pornography, flat out pornography that is just so accessible, so free, and so anonymous. So it becomes really, really scary for parents who are worried about whether or not their kids are doing any of this stuff. Okay, so let me run to a couple questions here for you, Chris. Are you up for that?
Yeah. And I do want to, hopefully through those or through another chance, there is a one or two technical layers that go along with the relational one. But let's see if they come up through your questions.
Okay, we could do that. I'll keep a mental note. Someone says, I haven't done anything to filter my kids' iPads. I'm freaking out. Where do I start?
Perfect. That was like a softball underhand pitch to what I just said. So that's perfect. So some of the other layers that we talk about are technical layers, right? So the number one most important digital device in any home, Hope, is the router.
Okay.
And it is the most underappreciated, underloved device in any home. Nobody thinks about the router until it's broken, right? But it actually has such immense power just to keep the junk out. It's like the filter that imagine that you were hooked up to city water in your home and there was some poison that was in the water. You would probably put a filter in place to filter that out so you could drink water. Your router is the poison filter for the internet, and it should be treated as if it's the most important device. And so we recommend the Griffin router for every home. It has an app. I can control the Wi-Fi from my house through a parent app anywhere I'm at. I can shut off individual devices. I can shut off the orange Chromebook from an airport in Georgia. It gives me that control, but it's something my kids know, right? It's not this secret thing. We never advocate for spying. In fact, in 5 years, 6 years, I've only told a parent that it was okay to spy on their kids twice. And that was once for somebody who was involved in illegal activity, and another one where a young person was in great self-harm, like they were, the potential for them to do damage to themselves was very, very high. And so those are the only two cases, Hope. I want my kids to know we have a router. I want them to know what it is, why we use it. Why? Because whether you're 14 or 40, there's stuff dad doesn't need to see either. So we filter it out at the source. That's the Wi-Fi layer. Now I understand that an iPad, for example, an iPad can have two postures depending on what type of iPad it is. Most often it's something that's attached to your Wi-Fi, right? But it may travel and maybe it gets attached to grandma's Wi-Fi. So what's on the iPad itself, which is that device layer that ensures that no matter where that iPad connects, it has some controls on it. So friend who asked that question, I would recommend that you go to protectyoungeyes.com, and at the top you'll see controls and devices, and there'll be an iPad, iPhone, iOS section, and follow those steps so that at the device level, no matter what Wi-Fi network it's connected to, you can ensure that there are certain things that are in place. And those are free. Every iOS device has free native parental controls that come on it called Screen Time. Now, they're not foolproof, let's say. I mean, that's a part of our campaign, is they're difficult to find. It takes 35 steps. We lay it out as clearly as we can. Apple can make it so much easier, but you've got to get Screen Time in place and then get that router, and those two layers along with that relational means that you're at least trending towards a B+ instead of not doing anything when it comes to creating an internet safer home. That's what I would say.
Other layers, Chris? You've mentioned 3 so far. Are there other layers?
I skipped one, Hope, and that it goes relational, locational, Wi-Fi, and then device. What I mean by location is that there are just certain places where we don't use technology. I mean, you know, as a therapist, that where we do certain things has a massive impact on how we do certain things, has an impact in our behavior. And I think young people are particularly impacted by, you know, where they are having an impact. You know, if a young person's in a crazy room, they act crazy. Right? You know, I've watched that in my kids, right? If they're in a room, there's a whole lot of chaos, especially my son Grant, who has Down syndrome, who sensory-wise is really impacted by what's happening in the world around him, and that will impact his behavior. I just want us to be aware of things like bedrooms and bathrooms and, you know, other people's houses and, you know, having conversations. You know, if my son is spending time at someone else's house, I want to know, and I know it's not always comfortable having these conversations, but in the same way my parents used to ask about Showtime, Cinemax, or HBO at a house that I went to, I just simply say, hey, you know, in our house, we try to filter stuff out. You know, if Blake is going to be over there, can you just give me an idea as to the types of access that's going to be around? You know, are there devices? Just so that he knows what to expect. It's not judgmental. You know, this is me in my head saying it's in the spirit of not being judgmental. It's a spirit of curiosity. Why? Because the safety and protection of my kid, and I'm sure they would agree, is really important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you ever get some drawing back or confusion or even maybe a little bit of judgment when you're having those conversations?
Um, well, it's probably different for me. Everybody who kind of talks to me knows, oh, he's the internet safety guy. Like, it's almost like, you know, if you, whatever skill you had, they would just expect you to kind of
Yeah,
talk. So
he can't help himself.
unfortunate, yeah, they all kind of look at me and go, yeah, Chris, I know who you are and what you do. And so, but, you know, if that is the posture of a parent that you're talking to, then my kid's not going there. I mean, they're not going to spend time. It's nothing against them. I mean, if I sent my kid over to a house that had a ditch built in the backyard with spikes and crocodiles in it, I mean, he may want to play there by saying, you know, no. If we translate the amount of risk that exists in the digital world on an unprotected iPad into an analog equivalent, it's really easy, I think, to get motivated to have these conversations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, to think that there are unprotected iPads around the house of a place where my child is spending time means that there is basically less than 3-click access to hardcore life-changing pornography. Imagine if I sent my son over to somebody's house and behind a tree that was behind a bush in their backyard, there were people having sex. Just anytime, all the time. In other words, kind of 3 layers deep, you'd have to kind of look for it, but it was totally accessible. Would I send my kid to that house? And I'm convinced that 100%, even bad parents would say, no, I'm not going to send my kid to that house. I don't think that's a whole lot different from having a bunch of unprotected iPads without any Wi-Fi controls on them sitting around a house, to be honest.
Yeah.
And so I think whenever we take anything that we are having a hard time kind of grasping in the digital world, make it an analog equivalent. And I just think our decision making becomes so much more clear around what we should do related to that risk.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully put. Becca says, great point. And I also saw her comment earlier about how she loves her Griffin router. And it's such a helpful tool, it sounds like. So yeah, that analog concept is something to really ponder for parents. I think of a lot of my friends who are moms of young kids, and you know, some of the big hitters that we're thinking about are, what are you going to feed my kid when my kid's over there? You know, or is your pool? Is there a someone going to be watching the kids in the pool, or is there a fence around the
Yep.
pool, or you know, some of these basic dangers? But
Yep.
nowadays we really have to armor up a bit. You know, we have to suit up as parents to understand things that we might not really understand, which is where you guys come in highlighting these things. You're not telling anybody they need to be hacking experts or computer whizzes. You're providing the information and the utensils, it sounds like, to make some of this stuff really happen. But at the same time, highlighting the loopholes, the ways kids can work around this, especially when it comes to, like you were talking about earlier with Apple, and the ways in which they can make this easier on our kids' well-being, and easier for parents too. So I love that work.
Yeah, could I add one layer to that going over to a friend's house
Yeah.
thing? I think that there's a really awesome opportunity to have conversations with your kids there too, right? To say, hey, and make it as tangible and tactile as possible. Say, hey, your friend hands you, says, hey, I want to show you something on YouTube. What would you do? Like, make it as practical as possible. And one of the simplest things that you can teach your kid to do is to always say, what is it you want to show me? Like,
Hmm.
force the other child to say what it is they want to show them. And I've had
Hmm.
parents come back and say that actually prevented an exposure, because the kid kind of goes, no, I don't, like when you kind of verbally call them out on it, they're a little less inclined to show you something horrible. Right. So no,
Wow.
what is it you want to show me? What is it? Yeah, just tell me. And giving your kids some of those real practical tools, or even telling them up front, right? Because you and I both know that shame is a whatever adjective you want to put in there. It's horrible. It affects everybody. Okay. And it's a real monster. But saying to them, we've talked about some awesome things to do, and I trust you, man. You've got this. And if you ever saw anything horrible at your friend's house, you can tell me and I will never be mad. Like, take down the wall of that little voice in their head before it even has a chance to speak. Because we
Yeah.
all have that
You
little
use those
liar that
words.
says, what's that?
You use those words. I will never be mad.
I do. I will. If you take the initiative to tell me something that you've seen, maybe you remember a wonderful guy, Colin Karchner, who passed away last October, an internet safety warrior, died way too soon. He used to say that his house was the no trouble bubble. And
Hmm.
I love that phrase. Now, there may be consequences, but there's a difference between freaking out and having loving consequences so that it doesn't happen again. And so
Okay.
I want parents to grasp that. And you may even say that to your, son or daughter. Say, we may do some things so that it doesn't happen again. But I do that because I love you, and I've never have you hurt yourself the same way twice. But just know that you can always tell me. And I
Okay.
want you to have the open door to do that.
Yep. And it sounds like you really want to equip the kids that have a developed enough brain to be able to advocate for themselves too, because it's true that there's times where they'll be in a lion's den without you there to guide and protect. You want them to think for themselves. So back to this idea of this simple phrase. You want your kids, let's say there's a 10-year-old kid over at his friend's house, and he says, the parents, maybe they're outside or whatever, he wants to take them into a bedroom to show them something, or show them something on the phone or whatever. And you're saying you want that kid to be able to say, what do you want to show me?
Yes, it's
Okay.
that simple.
It's that simple. How have you had that conversation with your kids, or any precursors to that you would offer to parents so that they can have an effective teaching here with their kids?
Well, I think the words can be, as sort of simple and just sort of comfortable as what I've shared. But in the same way that environment matters for our behavior, um, I think that we can look for opportunities that our kids may be more open to those kinds of conversations, right? So back when I was in youth ministry, I was a full-time middle school youth pastor for about 6 years. And there was an organization that we worked with that used to talk about car time, meal time, and bedtime as
Hmm.
great opportunities to have shoulder to shoulder comfortable conversations. And different kids are more open during different times of day. So I have a lot of bedtime kids who, during bedtime, we've created a routine where dad spends time with them. And so that just seems to be a spot where I can look at Blake or I can look at Cole and say, hey, you doing okay? Like, really, everything okay? Anything seen recently that bothers you? You want to just tell me about it? So bedtime is an opportunity for us. Um, Others, it might be car time, right? Shoulder to shoulder is good. I don't always recommend it being across the table with a bright light staring at your kid, because that just amps up the cortisol and the freak out. And I'm not going to tell you anything now, and
Mm-hmm.
so looking, I think, for those opportunities to say those things. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be scripted. Sometimes I have to get out of our own way and just seize the moment and just ask a simple question and say, hey, do you mind if I tell you just a few things, and kind of go from there. But each of the parents watching this, you know your kids best, and I think based on that knowledge, you can look for that opportunity.
Yeah, and breathe in this information, and your output can be in your own style, especially incorporating the knowledge of your kid and your kid's most open times,
Yeah.
and all of that. I think that's beautiful. Do you have time for one more question that we got here?
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm good.
Okay. All right, let's go with this one. I think this really pertains here to everything you've covered. What do I say to my 15-year-old son now that I've caught him looking at pornography on his phone? So I imagine this person has not yet talked about it with
Yeah.
the kid. So how do we backtrack after it's happened?
Well, there's no backtrack after it happened. I think there's only opportunities, invitations. So I don't know where this particular situation is in terms of the first conversation. So for those who are listening who maybe this hasn't happened yet, please know that the first reaction is always the most important reaction. And so practice right now not freaking out to every single horrible thing that could happen to your kids online. Because three years of I'm safe can be dashed with one freak out.
Okay.
And so you've got to mean it. If starting at age 5, you're going to tell your kid that no matter what happens online, you can always land safely and softly with me, it may be more up to you to believe that than it is up to them to believe that. Right? So that's the first thing I would say in a little bit more of a preventative stance. If that has already happened, and I've had plenty of parents say to me, Chris, I freaked out. Now what do I do? I think that one of the an effective approach, and again, every family is a little bit different, but whatever posture of humility you can then approach your child with as the second interaction is going to build trust. My hope is out of these horrible situations that there's actually more digital trust at the end of it than when it started. And that sometimes means apologizing for not being there when it happened, for not giving your kid the right tools to know what to do when they saw that, for maybe not making yourself as available and simply saying, I'm so sorry that as your parent, I know that this technology is everywhere and pornography, it's just a couple of clicks away, and you have a brain like a lot of teenagers that just based on how you're wired, it is really hard not to look at it. And I am sorry that I didn't do more to help you be ready for that. And I'm sorry that I freaked out if that's what happened, because I'm your mama and I love you, or I'm your dad and I love you, and I'm kind of not sure how to do this. And I think sometimes if we just let them know that this is hard for us too, and that we're going to be okay. So many teenagers just need to know that everything's going to be okay, that we're going to get through this. And so maybe just say that to them. I know it sucks right now. I don't like this either, but we're going to be okay. And at the end of this, even right now, I still love you. There's nothing you could look at online that could ever change that. Nothing. And you have to mean it. You have to mean it. And I think if you approach them in that way, you at least have the beginnings of a bridge to then have harder conversations. Say, all right, now tell me how it happened. And I don't think it's both parents, maybe one or the other. Maybe it's mom or dad. This isn't an inquisition. This isn't trying to get all the information at once. They're going to probably share it in little bits, especially if they're a teenage dude. I mean, they're just going to, this is on their terms. And so just be available and open and talk about little bits at a time. Invite them into sharing as much as they can when they can. Tell them some of the things that are non-negotiable as a part of this, to say, okay, we probably need to do a better job at keeping some of the junk out. All right. But you're 15 and I do need to teach you how to use this thing without me. I want to do that together, but here are some of my ideas, whether it's on the router or it's on the phone, whether it's Covenant Eyes, whatever it is. What are your thoughts about those things? Anytime we can invite the child into the solution is almost always going to be a greater probability of them buying in and obeying the solution, right? Give them some ownership in it whenever possible. So that was kind of a long winding path through a lot of just sort of organic thoughts about that conversation, whether it's happened or not, whatever child it is. And for everybody out there right now who says, I'm good because I have daughters, you're wrong. I want to call that out right now. Pornography is an equal opportunity destroyer. It preys on us at a neurological, like deep in our brainstem spot, okay? It does not discriminate on gender. Sure, guys maybe are a little more drawn to things that we see, but there's an emotional aspect to pornography that can even be accelerated by a young girl being abused in childhood, whatever. There are so many other complicators for young females that I don't want us to discount for a minute the impact that pornography can have on teenage girls too.
Thank you for saying that. That is so important to talk about the fact that this applies to any kind of kid with any kind of access to any kind of device. You were getting a lot of love for your comments just now. And, we saw your tears, Chris. We saw this comes from your heart. Now you have a depth and breadth of understanding of this that us lay people don't necessarily have, and which is why I'm so grateful for all of your hard work in this field to get this information into parents' hands. But, it has to come from the heart. We as parents have to introspect on this. We can't just say, okay, pornography is the enemy and here's what I do to attack it. We have to spend our own time taking a look at what it is that can actually happen as a result of our kids being exposed to things and then having unprotected, unsurveilled access to things that can just continue to escalate and create all sorts of excitatory responses in developing brains. And there is such a beautiful thing to emphasize here as well, which is the healthy sexuality aspect, to illuminate that these are not abnormal drives or curiosities. In fact, they are exactly how they should be. The problem is that there's these really counterfeit meals out there that serve as like potent injections into that space that we're created to have.
Yeah.
And so we want to teach them what the difference is between the counterfeit and also what it is that their heart is seeking, their body, their physical body, and their hormones are seeking something that's designed within them and that's good and whole and pure. It's just that there's so many opportunities for it to just be swept down the river without them being able to really establish it for themselves. And so I love how you talk about the relationship aspect. One thing that you really gave people today is what's the heart that you can approach these conversations with. And for any of you listening who are not sure how to put these things into words, you'll come up with the words, but borrow from Chris's style if you need to. His generous and enthusiastic, loving approach, I think, is the best way to generate that connection, build that bridge to your kids. I just want to thank you so much. What else do you want to share with us before we hop off, Chris? Anything else on the top of your mind?
Well, for any of your followers who want to send me a direct message because there's something on your mind, please do that. And we're very available that way. As an organization, some of the ways that we try to live out our mission is not just through the website. Over COVID, we built an app because we wanted to still be available for parents when presentations weren't possible. So you can go to the Apple App Store or Google Play and search Protect Young Eyes, and you'll see the Protect app show up. It has a little bit of free content, but then for $3.99, you can basically get everything we know. There's over 500 mini lessons and videos that you can watch. They're bilingual in Spanish because I live in Mexico. I have a real heart for helping non-native English speaking individuals get this right, because imagine how difficult it is being a parent of a bilingual child if you don't speak English natively. It's even harder for them. And so
Wow.
we have a real heart for making sure that as much of our content is both in Spanish and English as possible. And there's a faith-based toggle, both Catholic and Protestant. You know, we try to cover all the bases, and that's $3.99 a month. So as we say, here's my cheesy marketing. It's a lot for the price of a latte is, you know, my, I had to say it, I'm sorry. But we also hope do presentations. They're ramping back up now that organizations are opening back up. And so this fall, we have a number of schools and churches that have already booked us across the country to come back and to speak to their, you know, kids and educators and parents. And you can also, you know, inquire about that through our website. So those are some of the ways that we try to put action to this conversation.
Love it. I am so grateful, and I wholeheartedly support your mission and the things that you are giving to the world, creating a strong, emboldened sense for parents that they can do this, that they can have not only media literacy, but deep relationships with their kids to facilitate a healthy sexual development. This is right in line with the stuff that I do in my work, working with people who are further down the path, adults, and experiencing all sorts of tumultuous, painful betrayal as a result of their problematic sexual behaviors or addiction to behavioral problems around sex and their sexuality and the things that their arousal template has fused to over the years. And so I love the opportunity for talking with you today to talk about what we can do before some of that happens. And I just think it's a treasure, everything you guys are doing. Love your team. God bless your mission. I know I'll talk with you soon, but thank you for being here with us today, Chris. Thanks so much. Go see these guys at Protect Young Eyes all over. You can just Google that and you'll find them. They're the first thing that comes up.
Thanks, Hope. It's been my pleasure. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.